Ever seen something small online, like just a little complaint, suddenly blow up?
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time.
Well, that's exactly what caught our eye here. It started with Padre Fabio de Mello and a Havana store in Joinville.
Yeah.
Seems simple, right? Just an issue over the price of some sugar-free dulce de leche.
But it definitely didn't stay simple.
Not at all. So today, we're going to unpack this whole thing, look at the different stories floating around, and try to understand, what this tells us about online influence, truth, maybe even responsibility.
Absolutely. Because you've got these really clashing perspectives. On one side, Padre Fabio de Mello, huge online presence, makes this public accusation.
Right.
And then on the other, you have Jair, the store manager who lost his job over it, giving a totally different story in an interview with Ricardo Feltrin.
And Feltrin's interview mentions security footage, which supposedly tells another story, or at least backs up Jair.
Exactly. So we've got the Padres posts, Jair's interview via Metropolis, and some analysis from Ricardo Diaz on Conectado. We're piecing it together from those sources.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Padre Fabio's first public statement. What did he initially say happened?
Well, his first video described going to pay for 2 pots of this sugar-free dulce de leche. Standard enough. But then the price of the checkout didn't match the price on the shelf.
Okay, that's annoying. Happens to everyone, right? But that wasn't the main point, was it?
No, not really.
Hmm.
The key part of his complaint was about the interaction. He claimed the store manager got involved and was extremely impolite.
Extremely impolite. Wow, and said what?
Basically that the price was the price, the higher one at the till, regardless of what the shelf label said, according to the Padres' initial account anyway.
So not just a mistake, but rudeness on top of it?
Precisely. And he framed it that way. Not just I got overcharged, but more like this is about consumer rights. Businesses need to be careful.
Making it a bigger issue.
Yeah, tapping into that common frustration, but adding this layer of alleged disrespect from the manager.
And we absolutely have to mention his platform here. Padre Fabio de Mello has, over 20 million followers?
Easily. Maybe more now. It's a massive audience.
So when he posts something like that, it's not just venting. It's like aiming a spotlight, maybe even a heat lamp, directly onto that local store manager. The potential impact is huge.
It really is. It bypasses traditional channels. It's direct, it's amplified, and it can have very immediate, very real-world consequences for the person named.
Which leads us to the analysis from Ricardo Diaz on Conectado. He picked up on this, didn't he?
He did. He offered a more critical take. Diaz pointed out that, yeah, the price thing is one issue, maybe valid, but the real reason Jair likely got fired was the accusation of being rude.
Right, the extremely impolite comment. That's the damaging part, especially coming from such a public figure.
Exactly. That's the core of the controversy. And Diaz starts pointing out discrepancies almost immediately.
Like what?
Well, he questions whether the Padres' story of personally dealing with this rude manager actually lines up with, reality. Diaz noticed someone else was with the Padre.
Ah, yes, the muscular guy in a tank top.
That's the description used. Diaz suggested that guy was the one who actually first spoke to the cashier about the price, not the Padre himself.
Okay, so the narrative starts to shift a bit there. If the Padre wasn't the one initially interacting,
it raises questions. Which brings us neatly to Jair, the manager, talking to Ricardo Feltrin.
And what does Jair say?
A flat denial. He says, point blank, he did not speak to Padre Fabio about the price issue, and he certainly wasn't rude to him.
He denies the whole interaction.
Pretty much. He even points to the Padre's second video. Jair quotes the Padre saying something like, in the second video, he also affirms that at no point did we exchange any type of word.
Wait, hold on. So the Padre later admitted they didn't speak, but the initial complaint was about Jair being rude to him.
That's the massive contradiction Jair highlights.
Yeah.
If they never exchanged words about it, how could Jair have been impolite to the Padre in that specific context?
Okay, so what's Jair's version of how it went down then?
Jair says the cashier called him over because of the price discrepancy on the dulce de leche. Standard procedure. He went, checked the shelf label, saw the price, came back, and told his team basically, yeah, honor that shelf price.
So he actually agreed to the lower price?
That's what he says. And crucially, he insists the person who actually brought the issue up at the checkout, holding the dulce de leche pots, wasn't Padre Fabio.
It was the friend, the companion.
Yeah. He explicitly states the one who was there at the checkout is not him, Padre Fabio.
Wow. Okay. So why was he fired, according to Jair?
This is where it gets, well, quite stark. Jair says he was told it was purely because of the negative fallout from Padre Fabio's video.
Even though,
According to Jair, the store owners and maybe even the main Havana franchise in Brazil reviewed the security footage.
And the footage showed.
According to Jair, it showed he did nothing wrong. He quotes the owner telling him something along the lines of, "Look, Jair, we know you didn't do anything wrong. We saw the cameras." But Fabio de Melo's huge, beloved, 26 million followers, massive figure in Brazil.
So perception trumped the alleged evidence from the cameras.
That's what Jair claims happened. The power of the influencer's narrative, essentially, outweighed the internal findings. It really shows that imbalance, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the human side of this, he'd only been working there, 23 days?
Yeah, less than a month.
Yeah.
He talked about being worried, about his professional record being stained by this whole incident. Just starting a job, then this happens.
That's rough. So this brings us back to the Padres' second video, the one Jair mentioned. Ricardo Dias analyzed that too, right?
Yes. Dias focused on that apparent backtracking, where the Padres supposedly admitted he didn't speak directly with the managers.
Which is just fundamentally different from the initial story that went viral.
Completely different. And Dias has this sort of sarcastic take on the Padres, saying initially he didn't want to make a fuss in the store.
But then made a massive fuss online to millions.
Exactly. The irony wasn't lost on Dias. He basically asks, if you didn't directly interact with the staff about the price problem, why did your first video make it sound like you were the one personally slighted by the manager?
It's a fair question. Did Dias offer any theories?
He speculated, maybe, that the Padre was jumping to defend his friend, the guy who actually did have the issue at the till.
Okay, maybe. But even so, framing it as personal mistreatment of himself, it's still a disconnect.
A significant one.
Yeah.
And let's circle back to that security footage again, because Jair gave quite a detailed description based on what he says it shows.
Right. What did he describe seeing on the tape?
He painted a picture. Padre Fabio's kind of off to the side, talking to someone else. The companion, the guy in the red tank top, goes to the cashier with the items. He raises the price issue.
Okay.
Then the cashier calls Jair over. Jair goes, checks the shelf price, comes back to the cashier area. While this is happening, Padre Fabio apparently walks closer, maybe on his way out, looks at some alpha whores near the counter.
But no direct conversation between Jair and the Padre.
Jair is adamant. No conversation. He says he didn't even initially recognize him, thought he was just another customer maybe looking for a table. His only conversation was with the cashier about verifying the price. He absolutely denies being arrogant or saying anything like, take it or leave it at the higher price.
That level of detail, supposedly from the footage, directly contradicts the extremely impolite claim.
It does. And you can imagine Ricardo Feltrin's reaction during that interview.
How did Feltrin respond to all this?
He sounded pretty shocked, honestly, directly questioning Jair like, so it's a lie. I'm not seeing you talking to anyone, meaning the Padre here. Why did he go on social media saying he was mistreated? Was he mistaken? Was it another employee? You can hear the disbelief.
Yeah, you can understand that reaction if Jair's account, backed by footage, is accurate.
Feltrin definitely seemed convinced. He called the whole thing a scandal, said Jair was effectively slandered and destroyed by a priest's potentially inaccurate post. He even offered to help Jair and asked Padre Fabio's team to get in touch.
So Feltrin really went to bat for him.
Very strongly, yes. But then Ricardo Dias, back on Conectado, adds another layer of commentary. He critiques the whole situation, focusing on the responsibility aspect.
The influencer responsibility.
Exactly. Questioning the ethics of someone with that huge platform, possibly misrepresenting what happened, leading to someone losing their job.
Mm-hmm.
But he also had a specific critique of Feltrin, interestingly.
Oh, what was that?
Dias was exasperated that Feltrin seemed to be blaming the press for spreading the story. Dias basically said, hang on, where did the story start?
It started with the Padres post.
Precisely. Dias's point was forceful. A priest invented a story, caused the dismissal. You're blaming the press. Where did the story come from? Who created this? It wasn't the press, it was the priest. The blame is on the priest.
That's a very direct take on where the accountability lies. It wasn't media spin initially, it was the source itself.
Yeah, it highlights how these things often originate directly from influential individuals online now, and the media often follows or reports on that, rather than creating the initial narrative out of thin air.
And just to wrap up the reporting aspect, Feltrin encouraged his viewers to engage, right?
He did. He asked people to go back and watch Padre Fabio's original video to compare the stories themselves. And significantly, he shared Jair's Instagram handle.
Trying to generate some direct support for Jair.
Clearly, a call for people to see the other side and maybe offer some backing.
So we're left with this incredibly stark contrast, aren't we? A huge public figure's widely seen accusation, and then this very different, detailed counter-narrative from the person directly impacted who lost his job.
It really lays bare the power dynamic.
It does, and it makes you think, doesn't it, about that power influencers wield and the responsibility that, well, should come with it. How fragile narratives can be online.
And the real-world consequences. This wasn't just online drama. Someone's livelihood was affected.
Yep.
It forces you to question how easily things can be shaped or maybe even misrepresented.
How do you, listening to this, navigate these situations when you see conflicting accounts, especially one from someone famous and one from an ordinary person? Where do you even start trying to find the truth?
Yeah, and what's the ethical line for someone with millions of followers making a public accusation? Does the need to check facts become even greater? Does the potential harm require more caution?
It's complex. This whole Dulce de Leche incident, seemingly small, really magnifies these massive questions about online life, influence, and just how easily things can spiral with potentially devastating results for individuals caught in the middle. It definitely leaves you thinking about the weight of online words.